my great pleasure to introduce Jolene Watson from Clarity Coaching and Development. Yeah. My wife says I have to be here because apparently I need to talk nicer to people. So I'm going to listen attentively here from the corner.
I can help.
And I'll pass it forward to Jolene.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for attending this afternoon. One of my favorite, right? One of my favorite tips, if you're gonna smile, is to smile with your eyes. Always have wrinkles, the crow's feet. That means you're genuinely smiling. If you fake smile, your eyes won't wrinkle and people can tell from across the room, even with the mask on. So that's something that makes you look more approachable instantaneously. Everyone has the ability to create happiness for others. Some people do that by entering a room. Some people do it by leaving a room. Right? I think we could be both of those people depending on our mood and our attitude that day. So thank you to SAAR and Tom. I actually coached Tom on a 15-minute presentation that he did a couple years ago, and he brought me in. This is the third time as a speaker, so it is an absolute honor to be here. So a little bit about my background and why leadership is the topic of today. So I started out in veterinary medicine. I am a registered veterinary technologist and dentist for animals. So that's where I started out, and a lot of people say, well, how did you go from there to what you're doing? And I had no intention of being a manager at any point, but my boss didn't like to fire people. So when I was 20 years old, I was in charge of firing and hiring. And so that 5 years that I worked there, I took about 20 courses in communication, behavioral adaptation, and how to really understand how humans work and how to motivate them. So that's where my passion came from with the psychology side of things. When I left veterinary, I'm still registered, but I left for a bit, I went into human metabolomic research, into management, and then randomly I got a job managing 5 natural resource companies. Really random, but again, more management and corporate governance experience. So I learned a lot about leadership along the way. Full circle, I went back to business school 10 years ago, started my own company, and now I actually teach at SAS Polytech, which is where I started my veterinary career, which is really cool to come full circle. But I've learned a lot about leadership and motivating people along the way, and I'm gonna share some of those tips with you today, especially with your industry right now with the Great Resignation. So I'm from a farm, Bigger, Saskatchewan. My parents still farm. My dad refuses to retire, so I'm pretty sure he'll still be at it 10 years from now. I did grow up on a cattle or mixed farm because we had grain as well. And you probably don't know this about cows, but if you bottle feed them, you can actually clicker train them and they will play fetch. They call them pasture puppies. They're actually extremely trainable and very sweet. And this is one of the reasons I went into veterinary medicine first. And whenever I'm feeling stressed, I go pet cows at the University of Saskatchewan. By the way, animals lower your blood pressure and your heart rate and you will live longer. It's one of my favorite stress management tips is to get a pet if you like pets. This is my family and the love of my life on the bottom right. One of my favorite passions is rescuing kitties who have seen trauma that are older that nobody wants, rehabilitating them and finding them homes. And that's where my 3 came from. And my fiance is pretty awesome too. He's a millwright machinist and carpenter, so he's really handy. We just moved to Warman and we have the basement and yard to do, so he's gonna be very busy for the next few years. And there's Bosco. So this is a before and after. And you'll notice even a shift in his demeanor. I had to reprogram his little brain and get him to trust people, and this is neuroscience at work. And I like to do this with humans too in terms of retraining your brain, practicing new behaviors, and you can do anything at that point. And from a leadership standpoint, my favorite leadership tip ever is to coach people's behaviors, not the person. People get fired because of their behavior that they refuse to change. It's not who they are, it's not because of their personality. So if you say this behavior is not serving you, people often take that quite well, and they're willing to work with you on that, and we're gonna talk about that. So who are my cat people in the room? 2, dog people? Dog people always win, always win. Do you know this about your team? I do teach networking etiquette. Today is more about leadership, but it's important to know what drives your employees outside of work. What are their passions? What are their hobbies? Who are they? It's really important to understand the values and what they bring to the workplace, and sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect within that. So I can't give out the PowerPoint because it is intellectual property from Psychometrics Canada, but if there's any slide that you're interested in, I'm gonna be at my trade show booth for the rest of the day right till 7:30, and let me know, because some of these slides I can share because they're my own, and I can also answer any questions. And I do have business cards up front. One of my favorite tips for networking at an event such as this is, if you can, put your picture on your business card, because people are 60% more likely to keep it. And I think it's because we don't want to throw someone's face in the garbage, right? It works, psychology states. So posture, do me a favor, if you're seated, straighten your spine, move it from the back of the chair. When you do that, if you're taking notes or even listening, your memory retention doubles. Correct posture. Tony Robbins talks about this all the time. So if you're ever, especially in the afternoon, we've just had lunch, we're a little tired, correct posture will change your physiological state. And if you take notes, memory retention goes up to 90%. If you're ever wondering if you can break into a conversation in the workplace or at an event such as this, watch people's feet. If they're pointed towards each other and they're squared off, do not interrupt them. If one of their shoulders is out or one of their feet is facing out, that means you are welcome to break into that conversation. If you ever want someone that you lead or work with to open up to you, don't go right in front of them and square off with them, side to side. Drive with them, walk with them. People are more likely to be vulnerable and open up if they are not facing you, but you're walking or driving together. Teenagers especially. Anyone who has teenagers can probably say, yeah, they always open up in the vehicle. That's why. And when you break in, again, watch people's feet. So this is really cool. If you're leading a group of people, this is another cool psychology experiment. Have them standing, watch their feet. Everyone will subconsciously point their feet to the person that they feel has the most influence in that room. So it's a really cool way to look at, who are my future leaders? Who has more influence than anyone else? And it doesn't matter title at this point. It's all about influence. So the Great Resignation. It's a bit of a heavy topic, but I'm going to make it as light as possible and talk about things that you can do to slightly tweak your performance reviews and onboarding to get more people to want to work for you and want to stay, because that's really important right now. So what are the top 2 reasons that people quit their jobs across industry in Canada? Any guesses? Money? What else? Poor management, poor leaders? Culture? These are all correct. Any other guesses? Top 2, though. Those are all in the top 10.
Is it like office hours, hybrid, working in the office,
Oh.
demand?
Stress, hybrid office, that one's a big one right now. After the pandemic, that doubled in importance, by the way. People want a little more flexibility. Perceived lack of appreciation, number 1. That doesn't mean you're not appreciating your employees. It means they perceive that you're not. That's 2 different things, and we're going to talk about that. The second one is their relationship with their direct supervisor, not the CEO, their direct supervisor. So that's really important to create those relationships at every level. Here's some other reasons: early retirement, burnout, mental health, no advancement opportunities, flexibility, there's that one, and money is definitely in the top 10. Not shocking, but it's not in the top 2. And you can't see this from the back, but I can share this too. I have this study. McKinsey did a study in valued by their manager, sense of belonging, valued by their organization, and work-life balance were in the top 4 reasons that people either stayed or left. So you'll see a bit of a disconnect here. And why employees quit are those 4 reasons, but employers thought they were quite different. They ranked them in different orders, like number 17, for instance. So big disconnect of why employers think people are quitting versus why they're actually quitting. Here's another one. It's not better opportunities or compensation, but work-life balance actually did tie at number 4, so that one, very important. And it's important to note that work-life balance is different for every single person, so you can't just assume that it's going to be the same for every person. Like, I'm an entrepreneur, I work 14 to 16-hour days, but if I take an afternoon off, whew, that was a really great week. I really balanced that out. Whereas someone else, if they don't get their coffee break, that may throw them off for the rest of the day because they have a system and stability is what they really crave. So it's really important to think about each person as an individual and not as a whole. So this is really startling. During the pandemic, approximately 40% of people left the workplace due to a lot of reasons. Some of it was retirement. But more startling than that, out of that 60% that was left, over 60% of them said, I'm staying here because of where I live, because it's close to home. It's not that they were like, I love my job. It was proximity. So we need to do better. We need to get people to be experts, and we're going to talk about that. So employee retention and attraction, I think they're one and the same. Fight attrition or enhance attraction, we can do both. This is really neat. This was prior to the pandemic. Psychometrics did a study, Canadian study, across industry saying, why do you work where you are? What is most important to you? And these 6 things came out as the top areas. Service, team orientation, security, career development, influence, and creativity. Service orientation stayed the same during the pandemic and it didn't shift. So what are you doing for your community? Do you donate to charity? Do people volunteer? Are you helping? Do you sponsor that soccer game in the local community? People care. Which one, so it's not service, that one stayed the same. Out of these 5, which one do you think doubled in importance during the pandemic? Which one? Security? You would think that, but no. That's creativity? No. Career development doubled in importance. So service orientation stayed the same. How are you giving back? Career development doubled in importance. This is important to know. So what does that mean? Not that people don't care about teams, but that one dropped by 2. But they're more concerned about how am I growing within this industry? What are my opportunities for advancement? And what does 5 years from now look like? And if we're not focusing on that, if we're just day to day, people tend to leave. So it's not that there's less employees, but they jump ship a lot more quickly because the pandemic shifted our mindset to what is most important and am I actually being valued here? Or is somewhere else going to value me more? And that's where mentorship really comes into play. So the top 2 reasons, perceived lack of appreciation, we're going to start there with career development. I'll touch on state interviews or performance reviews, and then we'll touch on leadership skills, what you can do today to be a better leader. So I do facilitate corporate team building, and I use Myers-Briggs and Work Personality Index reports. Something that isn't done often enough is career development sessions where you actually sit down with your employees and say, what are your top skill sets? What are you good at? And I actually rate where they fall with these behaviors from 1 to 10. And it doesn't mean 1 is a failure, but if that person scores a 1 out of 10 on social confidence, for example, and they're in charge of sales, this could be a problem. So this is where you can really go back and say, I see this is where you want to go, but here's some behaviors that you need to improve on, or we cannot take you there. So it needs to be a group effort together, not just you do this, figure it out. Empowerment is great, but mentorship is really important as well. So ambition and leadership, those are 2 things that are scored. If somebody scores a 2 on leadership, it doesn't mean they don't have potential for leadership, but maybe they need a bit more mentorship, a bit more work. Maybe it's a 5-year goal, not a 1-year goal, but that needs to be talked about from the day you hire that person. What does this look like? What do we expect from you? Expectations need to be realistic, but they need to be set. If somebody walks in and has no idea, is there advancement? Can I be a leader one day? Then we lose them very quickly to other organizations that have a system in place. So lots of questions that you can ask, and I have this report at my booth if you want to come look at it. What specific job, career, or leisure activities do you want to learn more about? What education or training are you interested in? What deadlines do you need? What help do you need? How can I help you get where you need to go? They're questions that aren't asked often enough. So I am doing a draw at my table. If you want to come by later, it can be career development, stress management, or leadership, whatever you prefer. And if you think someone else needs it more than you, you can gift it. But maybe be a little cautious of how you present that to the other person. I think you need this. I won this. Here you go. So flexibility is really, really important in terms of a hybrid workplace. And it doesn't mean, and I understand automotive repair you can't work from home for a lot of these positions, but some of them you can. A couple days a week maybe if it's a management role and you want to get stuff done and not constantly be putting out fires. Sometimes a day at home is actually more productive, and it's something that isn't often talked about in industries that aren't used to doing it. So something to think about, the flexibility. This was a cat of, it was a meme that said people going back to work after the pandemic after working in their sweatpants from home. Right? And of course, the whole world of Zoom. My favorite tip, if you want to demand presence and get people to pay attention to what you're doing and you're online, have a microphone in front of your face. People will automatically assume that you're an authority figure and that they should listen. It's not very expensive either. Yeah, get a microphone. Even if for some reason it's not working, unplug it, but still have it in front of your face, right? Even if your acoustics are great, still get a microphone. It makes a huge difference from how people perceive you. And I have a really great one. If you want the link, just email me and I'll send it to you. It's very retro, and it's just awesome. So I can send this out as well. Let me know. Come to my booth. I have a paper if you want me to send this. Staples did it was a huge study, actually. It's about a 44-page document on the hybrid workplace and what people want now that the pandemic is ending. It's not over exactly, but ending. And 31 people want to stay fully remote, 34% want a hybrid, and 34% want to be 100% in the office. And keep in mind, this is across industry. In certain industries, you cannot work a hybrid workplace, but some you can. In certain positions, you can. So they're watching employers now. And I'm going to bring this up, and I know this is the industry that it's not commonly done in, but I'm going to give you a case study where it was just done in Regina, so in Saskatchewan, and it has been 100% successful. So when I say the 4-day work week, what comes to your mind? We don't. What's that?
Friday off.
Friday off? Yeah, 100%. I love Fridays. I used to always have Fridays off until I became an entrepreneur. I'm the worst boss I've ever had. So do you do this often in this industry, the 4-day work week?
We just went to it, started it in
Nice.
summer.
Nice.
We thought we'd just roll it through the summer and just, because I mean, the summer's short enough in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
But,
2 months, yeah.
you know, I was an 8 to 5, Monday through Sunday guy, right? And you wake up Friday and go, man, I don't even have to work every day.
Right?
But our productivity's up.
See?
The guys are happy. We're gonna roll with it through the winter.
Love it. And how many months have you been doing it, or years?
Started in June.
Very recent.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm going to talk to you after. People love it. They have more time with their families. There's 2 ways to go about a 4-day work week, by the way. Has anyone ever had days off during the week before as a routine? You can book all your doctor's appointments and do all the things that you would normally have to take days off for. So there's a lot of benefits because people can put a lot into those days, and it frees up the time that they are at work. So opportunity to connect with senior leaders is another piece that is missing in all industries, and we don't even realize it, but people crave it so deeply, and they're often afraid to ask. Like a half an hour a week with the CEO or someone that they deem to be an authority figure means the world. And I get that sometimes you do not have time, but if you can book that in your calendar, even once a month, studies show once a week is more effective, but people often don't feel they're important enough, so they don't even ask. And it's something that we can easily institute immediately, starting tomorrow, for example. This is my favorite piece of leadership advice from the Director of Human Resources from the SGEU here in Saskatchewan. The best gift you can give your team is your undivided attention and time. So book a weekly meeting. It can be 10 minutes, but employees, your team will feel so special that you took the time to sit with them and ask how they're doing. My other favorite advice was what a person needs is time to think. Greg Sutton, he owns a company here in Saskatchewan. His business doubled during the pandemic. He says what he does now, which he didn't do in the past, and his business doubled, is he says, I want you to do this. I'm empowering you. I feel you can do this. How much time do you need to be creative? Then he waits. And then they tell him, and then he goes exactly based on what they want, not his deadline. And he said it made a world of difference. How much time do you need? Do you need a week? Do you want a month? What do you need from me? It's a simple question, but he started asking it a lot more. So 4-day work week. How many people subscribe to Collision Repair magazine? So Max Reed interviewed me. This was just released. It's on, if you have it, it's on page 38. And it's an entire article on the 4-day work week. I spoke in Regina at a Chamber of Commerce event, and I brought up the 4-day work week because I always had Fridays off, and that's why I still get excited about Fridays. Even if I'm working, it's still a good day. And Max did a lot of research, and I'll give you some of the research that he did. 32 hours a week leads to an average of 8.14% increase in revenue, more so in your case. 95% recorded either stable or improved levels of productivity once shifting. A key part of the model is that in return for the gift, people will squeeze all of their productivity into 4 days. And they will. The thought of having a day off, it's like going on a vacation. Have you ever been really productive right before you leave for a vacation? We can do it. But if we know every day I'm going to work, we don't get in that mode, that excited, oh my goodness, I get a whole day off if I get these things done. It changes the way we look at time management. And here's a real life example. When I spoke in Regina, I mentioned the 4-day work week. It was random people in the room. Erin happened to be in the room, and she owns Kinetic Auto Service in Regina. That day, she went back to her team and said, what do you want? And she surveyed every single person that works for her, and they said, we want a 4-day work week. We want different benefits. They wanted a little bit of change up, and they wanted training opportunities. She implemented that, and there's a video, and if anyone wants the link, I can send that. CBC Saskatchewan interviewed her. Within 2 days, they were working 40 hours a week in 4 days. So they didn't do the 8 hours. So she still got the 40 hours. But she said in the last 6 months, not one person has called in sick at all. And people used to call in sick continuously on Monday. So Monday was the day she chose to give everyone off, but they still have Mike, the manager, come in and answer all phone calls, still sends cars home. Like there's still a person there. But she said it's changed the dynamic, it's changed the energy. So that's a real life case study in Saskatchewan. And I'm sure she would have no problem with you reaching out for some advice of how she implemented that as well. So maintain those relationships, lead your team. The 2 top areas that they found with leaders that were most important in maintaining productivity and that connectivity was concern for others. I had a scientist once score 4 out of 10 on concern. She's a scientist. And she said, oh my goodness, I'm not happy with that score. 2 years later, she redid it and she scored a 6. And she said, I'm not happy with that either. And I said, do you want to see mine? I scored a 9. She goes, I do. And she read mine and said, she goes, I never want to be that caring. So your goal is not to be a 10 out of 10. It's what serves you for the role that you're in. And I think with behavioral adaptation, it's the same thing. Of what behavior do I need to work on to get the goal that I want? And a 10 out of 10 is never the goal. It's specific to each person. And the other one was, are you outgoing? Now, speaking of outgoing, have you ever heard of the term introversion or extroversion? I'm certified in it. I am fascinated with it. And it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, but you do need to be outgoing in leadership. You need to speak your mind, and you need to be open and available with your body language and presence, the door open sometimes, maybe that half an hour, for people to feel that they're valued. So extroversion, introversion, you'll see the behaviors on each side are quite different. They're polar opposites, in fact, initiating or receiving, expressive or contained, gregarious or intimate, meaning fewer friends. Most of my clients actually have behaviors on both sides. And you can force it, and you can practice behaviors on both sides and get really good at understanding how people's brain work. And my favorite tip for introverts, how many hours do you think an introvert needs to really process something before they can be truly creative? How many hours? 24. They often need to sleep on it. No. If you put an introvert on the spot, they will give you an answer, but the creativity's not there because they need to process. That's how their brain operates. Whereas an extrovert, they can brainstorm, they can throw out ideas. It doesn't mean it's well thought out, but they can throw out ideas, and that actually energizes them. So it's really important from a management perspective, how much time do you need? When, let's say Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we're going to make our final decision. Give a couple days so that people can give you more feedback. So meeting etiquette is something that's really important from a leadership perspective. This is my fiance's screenshot. He knows that I show this, but he's a full-on introvert by nature, but look at how expressive he is. His one behavior is way over on the extrovert side because he's practiced it for years. And you would guess him as an extrovert, but energy-wise, he gains energy with fewer people. An event like this, he'd need a nap, right? A big difference. Just shows that people are very flexible and unique. Solitude is a crucial ingredient to creativity. And if introversion fascinates you, Susan Cain wrote a book called Quiet. She also has a TED Talk, and she talks about the difference from a neuroscience perspective from introverts, and they're actually powerful leaders. But occasionally they have to practice extroverted behaviors. So that's where behavioral adaptation really excites me, because you can do anything you want if you're willing to flex. So developing people, performance reviews. If you're conducting exit interviews, perhaps it's too late. Does anyone do stay interviews? Nice. I'll introduce, maybe you already do, maybe you just don't call them that, but I'll introduce you to this concept. It's not new, but it was resurged during the pandemic. So what is the golden rule? Treat people how? Treat people the way you want to be treated. Careful with this. Often people upset us, we get irritated because they don't do the things that we would have done. So with the golden rule, when you treat people the way you want, often it's not what they want, need, or like. because they are so opposite sometimes with not just their personality, but their religion, their cultures, their values. So be very cautious when you treat people the way you would want. I prefer the platinum rule, which is to treat people the way they want. And it takes practice. It's not easy, but the more you practice behaviors, the easier you can read body language and adapt to the person in front of you. And that's sales in a nutshell, really. So thinking and feeling, this is my favorite area of personality, and it's how you make decisions. Thinkers tend to use logic. They are very objective, and they can easily remove their emotions from a situation and jump right in. Sometimes they're a little critical because they're brilliant at strategy and finding fault so they can fix it. Feelers, a little bit opposite. They tend to take their emotions straight into a situation, more subjective, and sometimes, not always, sometimes they get taken advantage of in the workplace because they are too kind or too empathetic. Sometimes that gets them a little bit in trouble. How do you think they feel when a thinker tells them they've done something wrong consistently? From a leadership perspective. They feel attacked. And sometimes thinkers think feelers are a little bit too emotional. I've worked with a lot of thinker leaders, and they say it is exhausting to tell people how great they are all day. Can't they just do their jobs? Certain personalities need a little bit of reinforcement more often. It's really important to know that. So this is my case study. This is my profile at the top. I'm a little bit of a feeler. Veterinary, makes sense. There's a lot of feelers in veterinary. I have high empathy, lots of compassion, very accommodating. I happen to work with, in the potash industry, my boss was an extreme thinker. Very low empathy, high logic. Every day for 8 months, he told me what I did wrong. I cried a lot of nights, and I had my resignation letter ready, but I was really loyal, so I didn't know how to give him the letter. And one day he said to me, "My intuition tells me, Jolene, that you are going to quit." And I said, "You are correct. Can I give it to you now? It's in my car. I've been waiting." And he started laughing and said, "Please don't quit. I have a feeling about you. Go get your Myers-Briggs done. Come back on Monday. Don't quit yet." And I came back, and that's when I saw this difference. We are the same person. We're both extroverts. Every other area we were identical, but this area. I was going to quit my job, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, I've been leading you from a thinking perspective. When I tell you what you've done wrong, it's because I see so much potential in you and I want to help. You're probably taking it as an attack." And he had 4 pages of notes of what he appreciated about me, the courses he wanted me to take. He actually planned on giving me a raise and changing my role to client relationship manager because corporate governance was killing my soul. He didn't show me any of that. I asked for a photocopy that day, and I did not quit my job. And the irony, that's really funny, he became my best friend at work, and 4 months later, he actually laid me off. And I remember saying, "Did you know you were going to lay me off?" Like, he paid for my entire Myers-Briggs certification just because. And he said, "Actually, yeah, it's a volatile industry. We had 6 companies at the time." And he's like, "I thought I might have to lay you off because they were downsizing." And he said, "But it's my gift to you. And what I see in you," and we did a lot of research onto career development. He goes, "What I see in you is entrepreneurship. I think you should become a speaker. You should do this full time because you love personality." He's like, "Potash is not lighting your soul." And it wasn't. So it was the biggest gift he could have given me, and he was the best leader I've ever had, but I almost quit my job because I thought he was the worst boss I ever had. But it was just a personality difference in my perception. He was actually a great leader, but I was perceiving it as an attack. So we both had to change. It wasn't just on him. I started asking for feedback because I finally understood his intent was actually really great. So that's where intent can get us in trouble. You might have great intent, but if you keep getting feedback that you're very intimidating, for example, perhaps there's some behaviors you might want to work on. So developing people, state interviews. What are you passionate about? Simple question. Do you think that we're actually utilizing your talents, interests, and skills to your full ability? It's a good question. And the third one is, what professional or career opportunities are you excited about pursuing? Keep in mind, some people do not want to grow, they don't want to learn anything, and they're really happy where they are. Leave those ones alone. Maybe they don't want to be leaders. Maybe they don't want a new course, but they're really happy. Leave them alone. But you might have some people that really, it's their goal in life to become a leader or to become an expert in something. So if we're not asking these questions, we're failing. And I'm going to give anyone in the room that would like a copy, this is an Excel template that exact boss from the potash world gave me, and it's called a scorecard. And it's Doesn't make sense to see it on the screen, but it actually auto tallies for you when you type into it. And I'll give you an example. He said, what do you want and need? Most important to least important. And he gave me this Excel document. So this was a screenshot from 2011. I wanted Fridays off. I wanted more team development stuff. I wanted to network. I wanted to travel. I wanted money. I wanted it all. He also premised it with I'm not going to do all 10 things. You're lucky if you get one. Cool. But he asked, I'd never had a boss ask, but what do you actually want and what lights you up? So he looked at this and said, okay, how happy are you right now in each area from 1 to 10? I rated it. I scored 49% happy overall. Not cool. He said, okay, I can give you 2 bosses instead of 4. Fridays off, but you're on call till midnight, Monday to Thursday. Great. Right? I got Fridays off. I was really happy. He did a few things. He couldn't give me more money, but it changed our relationship. He became my mentor, and it showed that he actually cared about what I wanted. So if anyone is interested in the scorecard template, it's a simple Excel template. He gave me permission to share it. And tragically, he passed away this year. He was my age. And so I really, for his memory to live on, I would love to share this with the world because he was the catalyst to everything that I am today. And I think as leaders, sometimes leading people out the door is also a gift. Or moving them around the company. Maybe you promoted them and they don't want to be a leader, or it's not what they expected. It's okay to keep them and maybe shift them to something that is really well suited for their strengths. So there are people who see you for who you are, and there are people who see you for who you can become. Be the latter for yourself. Sometimes we don't focus enough on what we want, and we assume that our leaders are just going to help us. So this goes to all the leaders in the room as well. Make sure you figure out what you want and let your leader know as well. So I did not resign, but I was laid off, which is ironic and awesome at the same time. So then we did some research on my personality type. I'm 3% of Canadians. These are the top careers in the world for the 3% of people like me. I already did the veterinary dentistry thing, so I decided to do speaking, coaching, teaching, and career counseling. So I designed my entire career based on what other people like me around the world do. So does personality matter? Absolutely it does, because it shows what lights you up intrinsically. Why wouldn't you want to know that about your team? Especially with career development. So that's what led me to my entire career. So here's a really cool question. In what area do you consider yourself to be an expert? What brings you the most energy and lights you up? And going back to the presentation from this morning with David, focus on what matters. If that person really wants to work on Mercedes or Tesla, get them trained, send them away for those 3 months, because then you have an expert on your team and they're less likely to leave even if they're offered more money because you took time and you cared enough to help them in the area that lit them up. And I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but it does make a really big difference if your leader actually takes note of what you're good at and helps you. If you use your strengths daily, you're 6 times more likely to feel engaged in your career and 3 times more likely to report an excellent quality of life. And sometimes you don't take enough time to really dive deep and go, but what does light me up? What is my natural personality? Not what do I have to be at work? And it might just be a course that you can become an expert in something. So a person who feels appreciated will almost always do more than what is expected. Would you agree with that? Charisma. This is called charismatic leadership. Charisma is one of my favorite words. Think about someone in your life that you view as charismatic or extremely confident, and you just want to be around them. What is it about them? There's 2 things that must be combined. Does anyone have a guess? Body language is a piece of it, but it's actual character traits that I'm looking for. If somebody's charismatic, what is it about them? Confident? What else? Engaging? Yep. One of my favorite tips for body language, if you want to engage people, is show the palms of your hands as you're speaking. Keep them between your chin and your belly button. So if you're up here the whole time, that's really distracting. But people know that they can trust you if they can see the palms of your hands. If you hide them the whole time, people might be like, I don't know why, I just don't trust that person. Or if I did this whole presentation like this, you might think she might be cold, or I really don't think she wants to be here. So again, pay attention to body language. There's a lot of research on this. So definitely those 2 things. What else comes to your mind when you think of someone you deeply admire? Maybe a leader you had once that is still top of mind. What did they do different? Passion. It's a big one. Yeah. Going back to the thinking and feeling, doesn't matter if you're a feeler or a thinker. You need to do both to be charismatic. You have to be warm, friendly, likable, but also competent. Do you know what you're talking about at the same time? What if you're too warm? I already mentioned what can happen. You might not get the job, you might not get the promotion, because you might just give it to someone else. If you're too empathetic and warm, people take advantage of you. So be very cautious about that. What about if you're too competent? What can go sideways?
Too confident?
Yeah.
Threatening?
Yeah, threatening, intimidating, and people might actually not trust you. You're really smart, don't trust you. And I'm not saying you have to do 50-50, but you have to have a percentage of each in order to actually be deemed charismatic. When I work with engineers, and I work with a lot of engineers, I am 70% competent, 30% warm, right? If I went in 70% warm, good luck, Jolene, right? So again, pay attention to that. And how do you do that? How do you blend the two? It could just be word choices, could be things that you do. If I use the word efficient and collaborate in the same two sentences, I've just blended both sides. So even email etiquette, you can blend warmth and competence together. Really important that these two are always combined. And if you're curious, there is a free quiz, thescienceofpeople.com, and it will show you if you're in the danger zone or if you're too warm or competent. But just know behavioral adaptation, you can absolutely get yourself into that charismatic zone with some practice. So this is my coach in Saskatoon. I mentioned earlier that mentorship is extremely important. Do you have a specific mentorship program for the automotive industry in Saskatchewan? Is there something like an overarching system? So there is one called the Rajmanic Mentorship Program that's for all industries, and these mentors actually volunteer their time, and you only pay $300 a year to be a protege, and you just say, I'm looking for this skill set. It doesn't matter the industry, and they'll match you up. And it's a one-year program. So that's something we currently offer in Saskatchewan. It might be someone in the industry that you admire, that you meet with for coffee occasionally. That's also informal mentorship. My mentor is president of Merit Contractors Association. Again, nothing to do with what I do. But look at his personality type. He's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. He's extremely detail-oriented. I'm not. He's my polar opposite in every single area, and it is the best partnership I could have ever designed for mentorship. He forces me, he intimidates the heck out of me, right? But he forces me out of my comfort zone. And he actually scored in the 0th percentile on compassion. Zero. He's less compassionate than 99 of 100 people. Now, we laughed about it, but he said, even though I'm your mentor, do you want to become my compassion coach? I'm like, yes, I do. So now I'm also his coach. And he gave me this as a joke. It says, work harder. I think it's good to pair yourself up with someone you're polar opposite. It gets you out of your comfort zone. And he was joking, of course. My scientist friend said, I really would like to give this card to my employees sometimes, not because they're sick, but they could just get better. I get both sides of leadership. Believe me, I do. She didn't give out this card, but it was pretty funny. So there's your hand, the hands. The research shows why are certain TED Talks viewed twice as often as others, and they actually counted hand gestures. And the ones that were viewed twice as often, they use the palms of their hands more, and they use their hands in general. So next time you're trying to convince someone or you're presenting, even if it's to 2 people, notice your body language and show the palms of your hands. And let's do a little bit of body language stuff because it's fun. When somebody raises their eyebrow and they're smiling, what does that mean? If you're talking to them and they raise their eyebrow.
Interest?
Yeah, that is so interesting. So if you are intrigued with someone, raise your eyebrows. That is universal body language. What about nodding? I agree with you. Careful with nodding, though. Don't be a head bobber. If you do this the whole time, it's really distracting. And if you nod too quickly, people will actually think you're telling them to hurry up. It's like, mm-hmm. Yeah. So 3 slow nods is your ideal situation if you want someone to really keep talking. If you want them to hurry up, you could quickly nod and then do this at the same time. Yeah. Head tilt, what could that mean? Dogs do it all the time. Why do they do it?
Curious.
Yeah. That is so interesting. I am curious. If you're ever having a profile picture done or a headshot, tilt your head just slightly. It actually shows that you're open and you're interested in other people. Leaning in, what could that mean? Yeah. Yeah, that's easy to do as well. This is exciting. I'm engaged. Fronting, you'll notice on my business cards, if you take one, that's the picture. I actually had to shred thousands of business cards. I recycled them because my last one was like this. Because I thought that was the way you were supposed to pose. And it turns out that shows that I'm not very approachable. So fronting, if you go to the room, practice this later, and go stand by the bar tonight, maybe at Dakota Dunes, and just front the room, people will automatically approach you because you look very open. So body language actually plays a huge role in how people perceive us. So there's the old picture, not big difference, but there is actually with how people perceive it. Side by side, we already talked about people being vulnerable. And again, careful or use it to your advantage, right? If you don't know someone and they keep talking at the grocery store, you could do this. But be careful if it's someone that you work with. And touching, again, a lot of people, it is the warmth side of things. They might pat you on the shoulder, shaking hands. That often shows connectivity. I trust you. Mirroring just means that you copycat the person in front of you. They're mirroring right there just by touching their knee. Because people like people that are like them. And there's a lot of research that goes into mirroring, and it works very well to get people to trust. Another really random tip, if you're ever pitching another company, look at the color of their logo and wear matching clothes when you go to a sales meeting, because they feel very warmly towards their color because they spent millions sometimes branding. So I have 24 blazers, same blazer, different colors. I have 14 pairs of glasses, and I actually match my outfit to the company's logo. It'll immediately change the way that they perceive you. Psychology is fascinating. And I get to buy stuff all the time. It's really fun. It's really fun. Yeah, it's a work, totally is, right? Engineers, I always wear black-rimmed glasses, by the way, because you're deemed more competent. By the way, if you have glasses, people will deem you as 8% more competent immediately. So if you're ever negotiating, you put on reading glasses if you need to, right? Has anyone ever seen this meme before? It's old. It's been around a really long time. It's my favorite. Never stop it. Is it true? You could deeply hurt someone. Hurt their feelings, for sure. Is it helpful, inspiring? Is it even necessary that I speak right now? And is it kind? This has stopped me from speaking so many times. And it's a great rule. And actually, high schools have this up in most classrooms as well. So it's something for any age, really. And extroverts especially, because sometimes they'll talk just for the sake of talking, which isn't always necessary, right? Relationship with their supervisor. So we'll touch on a little bit of leadership. We only have 15 more minutes together, so I'll give you as many tips as I can on how to be an exceptional leader. But again, I'm at my booth till 7:30, so if you have more questions or want to go a little deeper, just let me know. So change management, this is how it should go, but here's how it went during the pandemic. Not shocking. Also not shocking that leaders are scoring the lowest in stress tolerance of anyone else right now in the workforce because of the pandemic and the stress they took on from their teams and the layoffs, like all of it. So make sure you protect your leaders too and protect their mental health, not just them protecting their teams, because they struggled the most and sometimes they didn't say it. So that's important to know. My two favorite things, never use the words calm down. It actually ignites people emotionally. It'll actually ignite them. You can agree to disagree, but if you argue with someone, we often ignite them. So there's certain phrases that you can use, like, wow, I see you're really passionate about that. That's okay to say that, but you don't have to agree or disagree with people necessarily, but you can still have a conversation that is not heightened. And if somebody's heightened and you heighten, what happens? They heighten. It is not easy. Emotional regulation is something else that's really important. And employees, team members are often very intimidated by their leaders, so they often won't speak up unless you create a safe environment. So change your habits, change your life. Detail orientation versus big picture. SGI brought this up. Be proactive, be upfront, be understanding. When there is a delay, be proactive. In fact, I was told, hey, you should probably change your insurance to get a rental vehicle because supply chain. So I did that. That's very proactive. But you can also give details, or you can say, do you want big picture or details? Because you might, when my car got fixed, I didn't care when the parts were in. Just call me when it's done, because I had a rental car. But some people want to know daily, where are we at? What's going on? So ask exactly how they want to be notified. That's the easiest way for customer service. What do you need and want? What's the time frame? When do you want me to call you? Do you want me to text you? Customer service is key, but you have to ask the questions. Empathy is different than sympathy, Because empathy is where you actually try to understand someone's feeling and you really come onto their side. Sympathy is I feel sorry for you. Compassion is my favorite emotion, which is I don't know how exactly you're feeling and I don't necessarily care. However, I'm going to give you the gift of my presence and I'm going to be patient, I'm going to be here, but I'm going to have an emotional block. I'm not taking your emotions home with me. And I think that's a better serving emotion. And you can have 20% empathy and 80% compassion for someone, but be careful not to take that home. And I think that's where we get a lot of burnout with all levels of leadership. Can anyone relate to this? Of course, it's a golden retriever. They just want to please everyone, right? We have to be cautious with boundaries, and that's something else I talk about, emotional regulation and boundaries when it comes to leadership. The other piece that's really important is to ask for feedback. Because people will not tell you you're doing a poor job if you're their boss. But if you say, what could I do better? One thing. And then I'll maybe give you a piece of advice too, but I want to know how I can be better. And that's something that is lacking in all levels of leadership across Canada right now. So you don't have to do a 360 report, you can, but if you have a team of 5 people, you're going to know who said what. So it's not very effective. But just saying something like, what could I do better in this area? I want your opinion. And this is a safe space, and I actually want to learn. And if you create that trust, then you're going to become a better leader every single day because they're going to tell you what they actually need. Because we don't mean to, but leaders tend to be intimidating at times just because of their level and their experience sometimes. So a boundary, that's another one. You need to show up on time is not a boundary. I'm leaving at 7 o'clock. That's a boundary because then you can control it, right? So I think sometimes boundaries need to be put into place as leaders. And emotions, I wanted to touch on this because it is really important. It's not that you're a coach, but kind of you are when you're navigating someone's difficult time or your patient client comes in and starts screaming at you. Has that ever happened to someone? Ever? Someone gets really upset. What happens, you flip your personality type under great amounts of stress, so it's really childlike, an area that you haven't practiced comes to the surface, and often you can't regulate emotions. And if you can't identify the emotion that you're experiencing, the cognitive center of your brain cannot kick in, and then we are fuzzy. And this is often what happens in arguments or when someone's upset about something. So emotional regulation doesn't mean you have to be an expert at emotions, but if somebody says, I'm frustrated or angry, don't assume you know what that means. Say, well, tell me more. Because maybe it's not anger, maybe it is actually frustration. They want things to move faster. Anger is perceived injustice, and I love that definition of anger, and sometimes it is justified. But it's really important to navigate emotions as a coach or leader with your team. Don't just assume you understand. Ask deeper questions. And that's a different level of leadership, but I think that creates a deeper connection. And I have this at my booth as well if you're interested in diving a little deeper into emotions. I'm going to end on change management here in terms of when you introduce a big change and try to influence people, keep in mind 4 things. It's really simple. Macro, what is the big picture? 5 years from now, I know SGI is a huge shift right now in everything, right? And I had the opportunity to speak at one of their leadership events. What is the global situation? What's 5 years from now? Big picture. Because people that are big picture with their personality are going to get excited. Then there's going to be the other half of the room that goes, that's nice. What research have you done? Has someone else done this? Can you prove it? How does this look yesterday? And how is it going to impact me tomorrow? If you don't hit the micro, what's not working? What research have we done? How is this? What are the steps? If you don't do both, you've lost half your audience. It's really simple, but it's really effective. The other 2, hearts. What are the values? If you're going to switch someone's role, are you going to mentor them? How are they going to be supported? That's the feelers. They need to know that. Whereas your thinkers, the minds, are going to say, what's the logic behind this change? If you don't bring logic into your decision-making and values, that goes back to charisma, right? Competence and warmth. People aren't going to get on board. And leadership really is that you're introducing change and trying to persuade people to your way of thinking. And involving them is really important in this as well. So we have exactly 8 minutes left. So I'm gonna stop at change management right here and really hammer hard on the 360, ask for feedback, make it a safe space, say what could I do better, even one thing, and open up that round for trust. It will change everything because then you're gonna find out what you really should be working on. So thank you. We still have 7 minutes, so any questions based on what I've covered so far? State interviews. Who is doing state interviews? I'm just curious. How is that working?
Good.
Yeah?
Yeah, they change every time we go into them, so.
Nice.
I don't know that we've nailed down a process we're perfectly happy with, but
Yeah.
they're good.
Nice.
Try to do three a year,
Perfect.
every 4 months.
Yeah, every quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, and bring every person we can, every person in the staff.
Yeah.
One-on-one. So it's,
The one-on-one it's key, right? Because then they feel special and important, and they are. And I get time management, I do. I teach a whole course on that, but just a half an hour out of your week, you could probably definitely put that aside if it's going to mean the world to that other person. Yeah, and then the 4-day work week. Thank you for that feedback. I'm going to add you into the PowerPoint for the next one. If you're considering it, think about it. Again, call me anytime if you have questions about how to maybe implement that, some of the success stories across the world. There's a lot of countries that have done this for years. Canada's a little behind in picking it up. Yep.
you had a 32-hour work week, they've got 40.
Yeah. Yeah, so 32 is what they've done the research on, which actually shows that people are just as effective doing 4 8s as 4 10s. But some employers are not comfortable paying that extra 8. And so a lot of people are doing 4 10s, which is okay too. There's still a lot of research around there, but it's the 4-day work week, 8 hours a day, that you're going to find the most research on. And it's because you get a day off. People are productive.
32 hours is, my wife's from Denmark, and that's a standard work week in,
Yeah.
in Europe, most of Europe is
I love that.
32 hours.
Yeah. And you could try it out for 6 months, a year, and then say we're going to revert back if productivity doesn't go up. So you can put some parameters around it, right? Yep.
So I entertained that with the staff, we asked every person, and not everybody's on the same.
We had 3 guys
We had 3
out
guys.
of 15 that said no.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I just can't.
Yeah, and some people it won't work. And what you could also do, it doesn't have to be Mondays or Fridays. You could let people choose a different day so that you're not left with no employees, like the one lady, but she had her manager, Mike. And maybe some people choose 5 days. People with children, by the way, sometimes 10 hours a day is not going to work, for example. So that might be case dependent on the person, but if the majority want it and they can do it while the other people still get, because it's kind of cool, right? You're the boss. You can really navigate what people want. Yeah. But it does get a little complicated when it's not 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially shop and safety and all
Yeah.
this stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. And everyone wants Fridays, so you could say, we're going to alternate Fridays as that day, so you could choose.
Hates Mondays as well. So.
Just Tuesday to Thursday, right? Like, let's do a 3-day work week. Let's try that. Any other questions? And again, I'll be at my booth right until 7:30 if you have a personal question or it's a specific person that you have a concern about. Yeah.
Yeah, Jolene, sorry, you said perceived appreciation.
Yes.
So can you just tell me what the difference between a perceived appreciation would be and an actual appreciative
Yeah.
gesture maybe, or like a comment or just something like
Yeah.
that? Just so I can.
So an example, the same boss I talked about came in one day and he brought blazers for every single person and ball caps with our company logo, and he spent a lot of money and must have figured out people's sizes. So that's appreciating the whole team. And he was giving them out and he was so excited, and I remember thinking, I don't watch sports, I don't play sports, and I'm never gonna wear that. Either one of those things, but I knew that he meant well. So I was gonna be so excited when he came over and I was gonna pretend to be happy. And he said, I know you don't play sports, so I gave you a $200 allowance to go to Lululemon, buy anything you want, but you have to get my logo put on it. That was real appreciation, but perceived might be I went home and went, he doesn't care about me. Well, actually he did, but maybe he just didn't take the time to get to know each person at the deeper level, which he did, in fact, but that would be perceived versus not, if that makes sense. And I'll give you one last tip, and it's, again, we only have 45 minutes, but there is a 5 workplace appreciation styles quiz that costs approximately $19 a person Canadian, and it actually shows you what their workplace appreciation style is, and they're quite different between different people, regardless of personality type. Like some people want words of appreciation, and some people want quality time with the boss, for example, or time off might be another piece. But it's all perceived because I want what I want, and I assume my leader knows it, but often if I'm not vocal, they don't. So perceived is really important because that causes most of the stress in the world.
For sure.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
Of course, yeah. And if you want that link, email me and I'll send that. Yeah, perfect. Any other questions? We have 2 minutes left. How's that for time management? Perfect. Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thanks.